Do you love working with cherry and finishing it like I do? But sometimes you deal with blotchiness and it's frustrating and aggravating to get over. Well, I've got a secret cure for cherry blotchiness, and I'm going to get into that in just a minute. Stay tuned. I love cherry and working with it, and that was quite a common wood, and it has a beautiful color. Let's just check out this table I happen to have here. This is actually the shaker end table with the drawer course, but I want you to see this because this is the classic cherry finish. And believe it or not, there's no color on this. This is an oil-based finish directly on cherry. So we have our drawer, the interior is made out of white pine, which feels so good, and it's got a great color. But the cherry itself is just an oil-based varnish, probably 3, maybe 4 coats. I can't remember exactly. But you can see how wonderfully it gets, over time it oxidizes and it gets a richer color. So this was made probably 3 or 4 years ago. So it's gotten probably close to its deeper color. But when I finish this, as I'm always dealing with cherry, I'm on the lookout for some cherry that might appear too blotchy. Now, what do I mean by blotchiness? Well, it's this, I don't know, can you see anything objectionable on the front, like right there?
Yep.
I mean, but if you look at it, it kind of changes with the light. And if you look at the top, you can see. Let me explain what it is. How about we do that? And then we can get deeper into understanding what to do about it, okay? So let's take a look at just a piece of cherry here. This is a good 8/4 piece. And this is the end grain, which I sanded up nicely and polished over the edge. And then I left this clean. Now over here, I've already treated with a thin layer of shellac, which I'm going to talk about in a second. I also did here as well. And what I want to show you is what happens when you just put finish on end grain and then side grain or flat grain. And I'll just take a little bit of oil varnish. This happens to be Waterlock's original. And I'm using an oil varnish because this is a penetrating stain. It really soaks in. So let's go ahead and put it on that end grain. Okay, we'll just go up to the shellac. And then let's come over the top here. Just let it really get in there. And over the top. All right, so if we look at that, you can see, well, can you see? I'll get it where the light's good. So you can see how much darker the end grain is reading darker. This looks like a light kind of golden color right now.
Yep.
But that's the sweet thing about cherry. As it ages, in about a year or so, it'll get a deeper reddish, light brownish color. But the end grain there, you can see it's kind of darker and blackish. Well, when you're looking at end grain, you're seeing in the ends of the tubes of the wood, or the fibers of the wood. So it reflects light differently. It also absorbs the finish differently. It sucks it in like straws. It's end grain, and it just wicks it right into the end. So end grain tends to look darker because of that reflection and the absorption factor. Now, a lot of woods have what we consider to be beautiful figure, like this curly maple, for instance. We did this in a previous Shop Night Live where we used a, what was that now? Potassium nitrate? No, ferric nitrate. And it was a treatment we put on, we heated it, but we were trying to pop out the natural curly figure of maple. And we always love this, but what that is simply a very organized kind of wave. So it's wave after wave after wave of grain just rolling on that surface. So when we put the color on, it is absorbing deeper into the end grain portions, and it's also reflecting light differently on those end grain portions. So you see this gorgeous tiger shape.
Gorgeous, I love that.
Isn't that cool? And if I move it, you can see how the waves change. They roll and you get that chatoyance. Now, what's going on with cherry and blotchiness? The blotchiness is similar. It's just not as organized as curly. So you have these little swirls and pools, but they're kind of random. And so they can appear as figure, interesting. Sometimes they look almost ropey, like a wide curl. But a lot of times they're just not. They're these random pools, and they can reflect light and look blotchy. If you turn them, and they'll reflect differently. So unless it's really extreme, I don't pre-treat for it. I don't worry about it that much. I just think of it as the rich, natural figure, like this table. Here, I've put a little oil on that side. Now, remember I mentioned I put shellac over here? Well, let's go ahead and put a little oil all the way across now, covering the shellac and that end grain. And do you notice any difference? The untreated surface of end grain is darker. The shellac sealed and put a protective layer. Now that's kind of ugly end grain, but that's got a protective coating on it. So what happens when you apply an oil finish is it saturates in and enhances or brings out the contrast in a greater way. So you love using oil-based finishes on curly maple, for instance, because it saturates in there, it soaks in and enhances. See that curl pop? Isn't that awesome? So you get a beautiful result there. You want to use finishes that really soak in like this. You wouldn't want to use a gel stain that lays on the surface because it wouldn't bring out that figure that you're trying to enhance. But with this kind of thing, when we put oil on here, we're going to enhance the blotchy or whatever we think, right? So let's go ahead and just put it on this board. I know has some kind of blotch or subtle curl, and I'll go right up to that mark where we had our shellac. We left off with our shellac earlier. Can you see? See a little blotchiness there?
Yeah.
Okay, but it's not bad, right? I mean, would you worry about that? Maybe if it annoyed you, you would. Or, but now, so I'm going to put that over. Now, why do I like to not put the shellac on first? The shellac is going to act as a barrier. Let's just go over the whole thing and see what difference it makes. So just like on the end grain, you can go over the shellac, and this is wax-free shellac. So you're able to top coat it with an oil varnish like Waterlux like this. So can you see there's a little bit of a duller, I don't know how
Slightly.
it looks. Yeah.
Very faintly.
It will, as this soaks in, I gotta let it go longer. I can see it more from this vantage point. Can you see it more from over there? I can't tell.
Can I see what?
Does it look more blotchy on this side?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so that's the untreated. So because the oil's saturating and penetrating in more, it enhances and brings out that rolling grain in a more pronounced way. So one of the things you can do is apply a thin coat of shellac. And I'll show you how to do that in a second, one of the ways. But I usually try to avoid that because when I'm putting finish on cherry, the beautiful thing that happens with oil varnishes is that they work so well because I guess because of the way it saturates in and the way it oxidizes, it brings out, to me, the maximum color and natural beauty of the wood over time. If I shellac it, something in the shellac restricts a shade or two of the color from coming full on the cherry over a year or so's time. So I'm trying to avoid it. So sometimes you've got to treat for the blotch if you want to avoid it, and sometimes you don't. So it's always a good idea to do a test. Now sometimes you want the cherry darker than this, right? You don't want to finish the piece like this. So I want to show you a treatment for getting it a little darker, one that I often use. And here's what it is. It's actually an aniline dye stain, okay? So it comes in a powder form, and this is from Wood Finishing Enterprises. I've mentioned this a few times. I like to use this most because it very closely resembles the natural aged color of cherry, but it's an aniline dye stain. So if you want to kind of get a harmonious coloration over your cherry project and deepen it a bit in color, this is a wonderful aniline dye to use. And it's called Early American Maple Medium Amber Wood Stain Powder.
Just rewind if you missed that. You can get a
Or just call it Early American Medium Amber, which is what I usually call it. And this number, though, this is item number, we're going to write it down, right, in the notes. I forgot to give you the number. But it's 85-0143-3. This is a 4-ounce bottle. That'll last you a long time. But this is mixed to a concentration, so it's not overpowering and you have good control of it. The powder is 1/2 teaspoon per 16 ounces of water. So this is actually an 8-ounce jar, and I just put a 1/4 teaspoon to get the same ratio. Now, let's check out what this does. So here's a piece of cherry, and I prepared it. I've already sanded it, got rid of all the planer marks and everything. And then I dampen the surface to raise the grain. And then I'll just come along and I'd lightly sand with the same paper. This is beat down 220. So now it's really silky and smooth. I'm ready to put on my stain. Now, I'm always thinking of my hands, so I don't want to get any stain on there like I already did. But I'm going to get my glove on, and let's get a little rag. So here's my little stain rag, and I'm just going to show you how I apply this. I just sweep it down. Now, I usually have a rag in a bucket and gently squeeze it out, and you got a larger project than this, right? But can you see the blotch sort of showing up on this? It looks a little uneven, like wide kind of. You see that?
Yeah.
So not great, but the water does not affect it like the oil. Like when this water dries, you still can protect the surface. Once you put an oil-based varnish on there, the blotch is going to be whatever it is, you know. Now, to hurry this along, if you were in a hurry to make a sample, use a heat gun. And so, isn't that interesting? I'm using the heat gun where the blotch or end grain is taking the longest to dry because that absorbed more. It wicked it in. So I would continue to do this. Now, normally you're waiting for the entire thing to be this dry without a heat gun, right? But when you're pushing it, that's the way I go. And then I always apply 2 coats because you'll get a more even look and it'll bring out the full rich in the color. So after it's dried, you'll come back over and hit it one more time. 2 coats of aniline dye. And look, doesn't that look a lot like our cherry table that we showed you earlier? This is just adding a very natural cherry color. So it's not like we're messing too much with the natural beauty of the cherry.
I have some questions.
Okay, sure, go ahead.
Bob says, will you suggest methods to minimize blotch with staining cherry? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, good. Sorry. And how does shellac compare with a conditioner?
It's actually very similar. So a conditioner, oftentimes conditioners are shellac. All right, so many of them are actually wax-free shellac. So I'm going to show you how I put that on in just a second. But I did the same thing to another board like this, and I got it good and dry, and I'm going to swap it out for this. In fact, it's the same exact board resawn, okay? So this is with 2 coats of that early American medium amber, okay? Now, it doesn't look great there, right? So don't be fooled. After it dries, it's going to look very different than when it's wet. See that? So when it's wet, when you're putting it on, that's the color that you're going to get when you reapply your finish. So don't panic when you come back and look and say, oh God, that's not what I wanted, because it was what you saw when you wiped it on. All right, so I'm going to cover this up. And to stain this, now I'm going to do a part of it with shellac and part without. Now, this is going to show you how the shellac responds here. Now, unfortunately, I can't hurry up and dry the shellac and top coat it, but this will just give you an idea. Now, because we stained it, now that it's dry, that stain has not it's not going to affect it in the same way that putting an oil varnish on would. But this is a little too small of a brush, but I'm using seal coat, okay? See this? This is a pre-mixed shellac. It's a blonde shellac, but the key element here is it's wax-free, okay? Now, when you buy this, it comes in a ratio of a 2-pound cut, meaning there's 2 pounds of shellac flakes per gallon of denatured alcohol. So the best consistency I found to spread shellac is about a 1.5 pound cut. So I like it a little thinner than it comes out of the can. I've already diluted this. So you're going to add about 1/4 of the amount. So if you have a cup, you'd add a 1/4 cup more of denatured alcohol, and you'll be around a 1.5 pound cut. It's not that critical. Then you can either spray it or brush it on. I've done some other videos of spraying, but I just want to show you the results here. We're not really talking about spraying so much, but look at how this is going on now. And it's not going to be like the oil bringing out the blotch. Let me in fact, I'll just go half of this and then I'll do the oil on the other side. So the shellac is not as much of a penetrating finish as oil. It lays more on the surface and it seals the grain. So see how I picked up some color there from the stain. And look, let's just put a little shellac over here. You can see how much lighter it is over here. So you can see the warm color we picked up. This was non-stained over here. So we're getting a more aged color. This is still going to darken a little more over time. So you'll end up with a deeper color. So if you're going to stain cherry, use a water-based stain. It will not enhance the blotch as much as an oil-based stain. So like a Minwax or something like that. Those are really not as good as aniline dyes. But let's put some oil on here so you can see the difference. But this is going to take a minute to soak in. But you can see the worst blotch is actually in this area here. And then there's a little one there. So that oil will soak in. But you can use the stain and then the oil directly on as well, if you're not concerned about the blotch like that, to give you a more harmonious toning all across. All right, go ahead.
Okay. Ken's asking, does the aniline dye fade in the sun?
They can, was that Ken? Mm-hmm. Yes, Ken, they can. You don't really want to put any furniture in sunlight or by a window where it's getting a lot of UV rays. I mean, I've had natural cherry fade in the sun without any dye on it at all. So it'll kind of bleach out the color of the wood. So, but yeah, it will. However, there are other ways you can do it. You can use a metallic type colorant like trans tints or color FX, you know. But trans tint is just a concentrated metallic type colorant, and you could use like an early American maple. I'm not sure what color though works as well as this one from Wood Finishing Enterprises. But when you use that that other metallic colorant, that does not fade. It's very color fast, so that works really well. What else we got?
Okay, Evan's curious, as the dyed cherry ages, will it darker due to the dye? Will it be darker, I should say?
It will, Evan. It will darken as much as it would have without the dye. So you're getting that little kick from the natural deepening color of the wood, but you're already adding a little color too. So you're getting kind of you're helping it along. Initially, you'll have a darker look from the outset. But whenever you're working with this type of thing, and cherry is tricky, it's fussy, as the whole reason for doing this, but it is always advisable to take some sample pieces and do some testing first. I want to show you a test board that I did earlier, and this pretty much, this sums it up really well, because this board, this is just a single board, but this has really evenly placed out blotch. Now, I oiled this, I put a varnish on there, but from this line over was pre-sized with shellac. So, is it reflecting or is it looking okay?
No, I can see it.
Okay.
It's distinct.
It looks rich? Okay. But look it, you're seeing a more rich red color in here, but you're seeing more of the blotch. I don't know where you're picking it up. But this has that early American dye treatment on there to help it color a little, 2 coats. But still, you're seeing more of that blotch on this panel, but you get a better color. Over here, you've got the shellac, so you're conditioning the wood, the same as the wood conditioner, to prevent full saturation of the oil to bring out the full end grain. So you're kind of blocking the end grain in the same way we showed with this initial piece. You're holding it off a little bit with the end grain from full absorption. So this one, you can see a little bit, you're still seeing a little, I didn't really let that dry long enough, but this is the non-sized part. You could see a little more blotch there, right? Mm-hmm. But this will also end up being a richer color over time. This is a lighter piece of cherry. And that's one of the reasons to have that little trick of the aniline dye up your sleeve. If you're ever in a situation where you have to mix different planks to make something right aside each other, you can harmonize the tone with that aniline dye at the start.
John's asking, can you put shellac over oil? Have you said that?
Yes, you absolutely can. And that's one of the tips that I wanted to give you. In fact, as I said in the description, I don't really have a clean piece of cherry to show you this with, but I did this before. One, you can use the waterlocks or something like that. You can put shellac over the top. I don't usually do that. I don't see why you would do it, because the waterlocks is great on its own and it's more protective than the shellac. However, the one time I really do put oil under the shellac is when I'm in a hurry. I want to bring out the full color of the cherry, but I want the speed of the drying of the shellac. So this is great when you're in a pinch to get a project finished with cherry and you want to bring out the maximum color. The way I do it is I start with mineral oil. So we did this in a video some time ago, but all you do is take the mineral oil, and this is a heavy bodied kind of oil. The thing about it is it doesn't really dry. It's kind of an inert oil, but look, it goes on the wood and it's thick, but you can kind of rub it right in. I didn't sand this, so it doesn't look great, but it will enhance the color of the wood. This was often used with French polishing to prime the surface before they started putting on the shellac. So it's very compatible with shellac. But once you get it on the surface, like you wipe it on the whole frame, or whatever it is, then you'd come over the top with your shellac. I still got a little in there. But I usually wipe it down, but it's not even fully dry. And you might say, isn't that never going to dry? No, it actually does dry. So you put on the shellac and it looks richer than it would if you just went straight onto the wood without the oil. Okay, so you're getting a nice look. You'll feel a little oil through the shellac after the first coat. After a couple more coats, thin coats, usually 1.5 pounds, you'll have enough of build and you'll no longer be feeling the oil, and it gets kind of locked in there. And that's my super secret, speedy, high quality finish. It's great on picture frames, things like that, that are not, you know, you're in a jam, you got to get them done. But you can literally do that the night before, or well, the day before, the whole finishing, and give it as a gift the next day. So
Maurice is in the middle of shellacking, putting a shellac finish on birch. He
yeah.
said after the last coat, should I do a light sanding or should I do something else?
Yeah, I usually do a light sanding. I usually buff it out with 4/0 steel wool on the last coat. 4/0 steel wool, and it gets super slick and silky. And then you can hit it with a paper towel and then some type of wax, I like, for a lot of things, the ease of a spray wax is great. The Goddard's spray, it's like a beeswax lemon oil mix, I believe. Anything that's like beeswax lemon oil is really a nice finish. Rather than a paste, the spray on worked much better. Now, what got me thinking about this is I've been finishing the round chair, the classic round chair course we just had. And I thought about putting shellac on, but I didn't want to. I wanted this cherry to get as dark as possible over time. So, and I thought I'm going to live with the colorant. And after my first coat of oil straight onto the cherry, I thought, oh, I wish I had shellacked it. It kind of looked quite variant. But with each coat of oil, it got a little more even. I put 3 coats of Waterlock's Original on this chair, but check it out. This is the classic round chair. See on the front rail, you can see a little bit, but it changes as you move it. Look at the crest rail right here. Look how I'm turning it. And this needs more finish, but you can see the way the joinery is. But as we turn it, everything reflects differently and changes. But this is fresh off, so it's quite light, and it's going to deepen in color nicely over time. You can see the back, how it's got a similar kind of patchwork in the light as you move. But this is really a nice sculptural chair. And I was, you know what I was too? I was in the spirit of Sam Malouf, who always just oiled his furniture. And he used a mixture, his famous mixture. I believe it's a linseed oil, urethane, and a thinner. So it's 3-part type finish. And it's wiped on like this, directly on. Most of the time, I don't think I've ever seen him make a cherry chair, but most of his chairs were walnut, and walnut's very friendly. It does get some of this, but it's not like this. It's not known as much for that kind of blotch. It looks very character rich, you know, when you hit it with the oil. And I have seen some Malouf chairs in curly maple that are stunning and beautiful over time. So this one, I'm going for the natural look, and I really won't know until a year away. But you can see when it's down, it has a more harmonious, and I'm not done yet. I'm going to put at least a couple more coats on there till it's even sheen, and it'll get richer and richer over time. This is one last example I wanted to show you, and this is a chair also made of cherry, but made to be much darker. So you can get this kind of effect with a gel stain, but I did this one with that aniline dye that I mentioned, Then I shellacked it, and then I hit it with a glaze. I hit it with a glazing stain over the shellac once I sealed in the aniline dye, and then I put more shellac on. So you end up with this darker brownish red, aged looking cherry. This is kind of the schedule of finish on a different one. So we start out, we've got our natural cherry, and then we have 2 coats of the early American honeytone amber. Then we have 1 coat of shellac, and this is going all the way down the board each time. And then this is the coat of glazing stain that goes all the way down. So see how much darker that went over there. And then you're getting your successive top coats of finish on there. So you end up with a color, something like this, depending on how you're applying it. So you can see this one has a darker look, but you can even see some of that figure or blotch in that front rail. But as I rotate it, it disappears at certain angles. It's just the nature of cherry. And I think you gotta accept that that is the character of cherry. And over time, it looks beautiful. Like, I don't even give it a second thought when I look at that table. I think, wow, that's got some nice figure in the top. It's just not as organized as curly maple.
Curly cherry, anything to say about building furniture with that and finishing on that? Is that unique?
Yeah, it's very similar. I mean, curly cherry isn't as common. It's quite rare to find cherry with this kind of curl. It's very rare. Usually when cherry has a curl, they call it ropey curl because it's wider bands. There's a little of that ropey curl on the lamination that I used on the side of my chair. You see that right there? You see that? Mm-hmm. That's usually what people call ropey curly. Is it reflecting for you?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a nice look, but it's the same issue. It's really the very same thing. If you want to enhance it, go directly on it with the oil varnish. If you want to mute it a little, start with a wash coat of 1.5 pound cut of shellac. If you want to mute it even more, put 2 of those coats on and then go with your oil varnish over the top.
I think we're good.
All right, everyone. Well, I hope that encouraged you a little bit. Just remember, finishing is an art, and wood is so beautiful and variant that no 2 pieces or experiences exactly the same. So you've got to relax a little when you get into the finishing process and experiment, and always try some test pieces. But I know you'll have a good experience, and hey, it's only wood and it's all good in the end. So hey, remember, if you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing, liking, and sharing. And as always, head on over to epicwoodworking.com and check out the courses and consider moving into the neighborhood. It's a great time of year for that.
Yes.
All right. Well, on behalf of the camera lady and myself, we look forward to seeing you next time right back here on Shop Night Live.
Yes. Thank you all.
All right. Whatever you do, make it epic.
Yes. Yes.
See ya.
Thanks for joining us. See you later.